All right, I have a extra special episode for you guys today. On this episode, we are going to solder up a speed controller. All the wires on the speed controller, the motor wires, the battery wire. And the reason why I say it's special is I got this speed controller from a friend, and the soldering that's on it right now is quite possibly some of the worst soldering I've ever seen. And so I'm going to show this to you guys, and this is going to start out what not to do, and then I'm going to show you how to pull these wires off and clean all the solder off and put new wires on. So let's get started. Okay, so here we are in table view, and what you can see here is this is a used Hobbywing XR8 Plus speed control. Great speed controller for truggy. You can see what I mean by this solder. Man, I don't know how this negative terminal is still on there and how it was working. These solder joints got way too much solder on them and not fully penetrating the wires, etc. And then here's that switch I was telling you about that it came untaped and got ripped off when he was driving. So I'm going to start off with this, I'm going to take all of these wires off. So to take these wires off is what I do is I get my solder ready, put a little bit on the tip here to get things moving, and then add some solder. Get this thing melting. Man, that solder doesn't want to melt. I think we are going to have to turn my iron up just a little bit. Go to around 860 Fahrenheit. You don't want to leave this on too long. Come on, get off of it. There we go. Yeah, you don't want to leave the iron on this thing too long. And the other thing is you want to give the speed controller a chance to recover from that heat. So like I don't do them all right in a row either. I'm going to pull this negative terminal off. That one was a lot easier. That's about, like, you want to try not to stay on these posts as long as I had to for that one. And, you know, make sure you lay the iron flat on the tip. Don't stick it up like this. Lay it flat on the tip. And bring it in here. Melt some solder to get it moving, and there you go. I don't know why, I think just so much solder on here that it's making this one. Okay, let's let that cool off for a minute. Man, that's a lot of solder. So I'm going to take the rest of these off, and then I'll show you how, you know, there's a ton of solder on like this negative terminal you can see, and so we're gonna clean that stuff up too. Like you can't have that much solder on these. So let me clean it up and I'll come back. All right, so to clean up this solder, I use this contraption. It's called a solder sucker, and is what you do is you push this in, you heat up the solder, and then you push this button, and it sucks the solder in for you. So we're gonna see if I can't get this thing in here and suck some of that solder out. There we go. That one is pretty clean. There's a little bit right in there, and then you can see now you can eject all that solder out. And so, yeah, this is a really nice contraption. I actually got it from a store in Bellevue. Yeah, I'm gonna clean up the rest of these and then we'll come back. All right, so I cleaned up the posts here, got most of that solder off. It's looking pretty good. And then I took this thing apart because I want to put a new switch on it since this one got ripped off. And to do that, these micro solders inside, I switched, hopefully you guys can see that, but I switched to a smaller tip so I can really get into these small spots. So I'm going to put just a little solder on there and come in there and pull that. It's being a little tricky. Actually, another FYI, I turned my iron down to about 800. These littler wires don't need to be as hot. Man, that thing is being irritating though. I think I'm gonna get some needle nose. Actually, you know what's gonna work better? I'm just gonna cut this connector down like that and then pull these wires apart so I can pull them off one by one. That is going to work way better. Okay, so now there's one. There's two. There's three. There's four. Man, you have a newfound respect. The little soldering they do in these. Alright, so then we pull this new switch in, and it was underneath this little rubber gasket, which this gasket worked pretty well. I was surprised how clean it was inside of here. So we're going to put it like so. I'm going to go back and do these one at a time again. Not sure if I want to pre-tin this or not. Alright, so not super experienced at doing these smaller wires, but as what I found out is you really can't pre-tin the wires. So as what I ended up doing is putting a little flux right here on them, and there was enough solder already on the board that I just kind of heated them up on that board, and you can see got them soldered up there. And then routing this cable is a little tricky. I had to pull the other one out as well and then kind of route them together. So anyway, I'm gonna put this case back on. It just goes on this way, and there's 4 screws from the top. And then I took the fan off, but didn't really have to. 4 more screws for the fan. So yeah, the one thing I found trying to get this case back together is the rubber gasket. If you left it on the board where we saw it when I started, it will actually it'll come off. So I found it easier to put the rubber gasket in this plastic case. There's like some bosses. You put it on that and then you feed this together. It worked much better. And then here's the 4 screws I mentioned. It's kind of irritating because they're Phillips screws, but they go right in there. And then the fan, you have to make sure you mount it so the plug can reach, but it goes on there. So I'll put this together and come back. So from here, I want to run the wires, and to do this, I always set this thing up like it's going to be in the car. So I like to put the battery in here and have the connector. I like to secure it with a battery strap so it doesn't flop around. And I pre-cut these wires. They're a little long maybe. We'll size them up better once they get on the car, but I pre-cut them. And I'm actually going to solder this connector on first because I find it can be a little pain when it's up high on the car. So we're going to solder it down below first. These connectors, they're Dean's T-plug connectors. I'm not a huge fan of these, but my friend uses them, so we're going to use them. And they have the positive and negative marked on them. The reason why I'm not a huge fan of these is they don't handle heat and amperage as well as, say, like an EC5 or an XT90. So I would recommend one of those over these, but this is what my friend uses, so that's what we're going to do in this video. So the first step here is we're going to strip this wire, and I don't like to get a ton of wire stripped, just enough to make that terminal connection. So we're going to strip that. Yeah, these wire strippers are nice because they hold the wire for you. I really like them. So we strip that wire, and then we come in here and we put just a little bit of flux. This flux helps to get the heat where you want it. Alright, so once you get the flux on the wire, then is what we want to do. It's called pre-tinning. And so you want to add solder to the wire and add solder to the connector separately, and then you combine them. And so to do this, I like to go underneath the wire and push up and then feed solder in. And I do that until then you're able to feed right from the top. And that means you got full penetration of solder into that wire. And then there's a little strand right there. I'm just gonna push in there. And then for the connector, just get a little on there, like so. So if I show you these up close, the wire looks like that, and you got full solder penetration. And then the connector looks like that. So you got that fully. And then for this wire, I'm kind of a little bit anal, and I like the writing to point down. So I'm going to put it on like that. And, you know, be careful if you're using these Dean's connectors and it's already on the speed control, then you want to make sure you slide these on first. But I'm going to do it after, since I'm doing this off the speed control. And you want to also make sure that you're not heating this connector up too much. Let's move that out of the way. These wires can get pretty hot too, so I'm going to try to do it without using needle nose, which might be a mistake. You just want to heat this until you see the solder flowing around that connector, like on the bottom side on the actual connector. And yeah, so that looks good. That's a little warm. Let's see here. So you can see there, nice and good solder joint. So now I'm going to do the same thing for the negative, and then I will come back and show you the finished result. Alright, so we got the connector on here. This little sleeve was kind of tough to put on. I used this wrench and just kind of pushed on it to get it on. Really happy that I did this off the car. It was much easier. So now is what I want to do is size this thing up properly and cut this wire to fit. I made it intentionally a little bit long. And you want to give yourself a little bit of extra wire just so you can easily pull this thing on and off. I think I'm going to go like right there. So we cut this off like so. And then we will put this on the speed controller. And it's going to be the same process as before. I've already got these posts pre-tinned. Yeah, be careful that you have this thing set right on the plate when you're measuring this. But anyway, I already have these posts pre-tinned, so I'm going to strip this wire and pre-tin this one and put it on, and then I'll size the black terminal after I put this one on. So yeah, I'll pre-tin this and come back when I'm going to solder it. Okay, so we got this wire pre-tinned, and I stacked these pliers up to kind of hold this connector in line. And as what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this iron tip flat on this wire, and I'm going to feed a little solder in because that helps get the solder flowing more quickly. And you want to see the solder blow on the post actually flowing before you remove heat. And you know, you want to be careful. Don't leave heat on the speedo for too long. Like, I wouldn't want to do it for much longer than what I just did there. So if we look at this up close now, there's that solder joint. It's super tight and it forms all the way around, and like you can look down in here and see that it's going all the way around that connection, which is exactly what you want. So here we go. We size this one up now. I'm gonna go like right about there. I will pre-tin this one and come back. Okay, here I am back. I got this wire pre-tinned and I put it in my third hand here to hold it for me. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to heat this up and add solder. You want to see it flowing below that post like so, and remove heat. And just make sure you don't leave heat on that too long, because you can damage the speed control if you do it. And also, you've been noticing that like after every time I apply solder, I clean this tip on the sponge. It's really important to keep a clean tip. All right, so we have got the battery terminals all soldered up now and ready to go. That looks good. So the next step is I want to put this thing in the car and kind of predetermine the lengths of wire I need over here. I think I'll solder these on before I put it in the car, and then I'll install it in the car and solder the motor side. But I'm gonna have a look at that and I will come back and we'll discuss that. All right, so we got these wires all pre-tinned and I've got this first one set up, and you notice like I kind of wanted this one to angle and not come out straight like I did over here, to kind of get around the motor. So I've got that one started up at an angle, and I'm just gonna come in here with some heat. On this side, get that solder flowing. Let that cool off. And there we go. That's the first motor wire, and that looks really good. Yeah, hopefully you guys can see that. Nice and tidy. So I'm going to do the same kind of angle on this second one, and then this third one is going to come out straight. So same kind of angle here. I'm going to move this fan wire so I don't melt it. Stick that over there for now. Okay, got that one lined up. That one also looks pretty good. I think I'm going to put a little more on the back side. That one. Just didn't like the way that looked. Yeah, both of those feel nice and solid now. And let's put this last one on. And remember, I'm always pointing the letters down. I like to have my letters down. Let's move this back over here. That was maybe a little more solder than needed, but here we go. So got all those connections ready to go. So now the next step I'll do here is I'm gonna tape this speed controller down and put all this thing in the car. For 8 scale speed controllers, I like to use this Kyosho Zeal double back tape. It's really meant for gyros and helicopters, but it gives this thing some movement, and just really I found it helps prevent failure of these speed controllers, and so I like to use this Zeal tape. Is what I'll tell you though is the adhesive backing likes to come off of these, so I just pull it off, and then I use this ProTech red tape on both sides of this, just because the Zeal tape is not super good, it comes off. So I just take an X-Acto and peel the tape layer off and use the ProTech tape instead. The other thing I'll tell you is if you have this come off later, you can actually just use like a citrus cleaner and clean this Zeal tape and reuse it. So you clean it up with the citrus cleaner and, you know, like a lint-free rag, and just put more ProTech tape on it, and you can reuse this Zeal tape as long as it doesn't rip or tear. All right, so I'm gonna go off. I'm gonna put this tape on and mount this thing up, and we'll come back and finish the soldering job. So I just wanted to show you guys that Zeal tape layer I was talking about. You know, you just use an X-Acto knife to peel that up, and then you pull this little tape layer off. Otherwise, it will come off in fairly short order. I don't know why they made this so chintzy, but it will come off in short order. And you know, you can see kind of how much. It doesn't have to cover the entire bottom. So anyway, I'm going to get the ProTech tape out and tape this in. All right, I am back. I got this speed controller. You can see the Zeal tape lets it move around, and I got that all secured with the Zeal tape. Got my plug in here. I'll mount this switch later. It's a good thing I didn't record when I was doing the Zeal tape, because that ProTech backing on that ProTech tape is so hard to get off. Wouldn't have been appropriate for children for sure. So good thing we did that off camera. So now we're going to put these wires on. All right, so I have the A wire. I'm going to start with A and work my way to C because it's easier to get the iron on this side. And I've got this wire all pre-tinned. And I'm going to route this one kind of like so. Hopefully I can do this without adding a bunch of solder. Remember, you're going to heat this up. It takes a little longer when I don't add solder. heat it up until you see that solder flowing around it on the motor. There we go. This is when I truly do need a third arm, or third hand, so to speak. So the next one we're gonna do is kind of like that. And notice I'm leaving kind of a bit of a loop here. It makes it easier to take your motor in and out if you leave some extra, so that's why I'm doing that. Okay, so we got the next one all sized up here and ready to go. We're gonna hold it on like that. Do the same thing here and heat it up. That connection looks good, and so then we'll do the final one. You know, as I go along, I've been sizing these wires. I kind of like to make them have like a uniform kind of parallel look to them. And so I'll just like put my fingers right here and trim this wire to size. So let me pre-tin that and then we'll come back. All right, so we got the final wire to put on here. Gonna hold that one like so. That one could use just a tad more solder, so oof, oh man, okay. All right, looks good. So you'll notice too that I mounted this receiver wire, wrapped it around this way. I wanted to keep it away from the drive line. And we'll mount this switch kind of like that. So we can reach in here and turn that on and off right through there. Anyway, that concludes soldering. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.